Hello and welcome, fellow prey plessers from all over the world. Oh, come on! If you don't know me, I'm Julian, an indie game developer, and I'm working on my first team game, Hidden Tactics. It's a PvP tactical Autobattler game. Yes, it's my first Steam game and it's multiplayer PvP. In Hidden Tactics, you'll be selecting one faction out of the 4 stereotypical fantasy factions: human, elves, dwarves, and orcs. And with each faction having its own roster of units and buildings, you'll be creating your own unique deck in order to face out opponents in battle. The goal of the game being to destroy as many villages as possible on the opponent's side of the battlefield, whilst keeping your villages intact. If you're interested in this game, you'll find the link to Hidden Tactics Steam store page in the description below. Feel free to go wishlist it. This really helps me to stand out in the Steam algorithm. I check Hidden Tactics wishlist count every day, so each one of your wishlists creates a small dopamine boost in my little developer brain. So wishlist Hidden Tactics for a dopamine release. Not sure that's very healthy. In this video, I'm going to go through each unit I've added this week. There are quite a few of them, so we better get started now. To keep this video organized, I'm first going to present you the different unit categories. In fact, in each faction you will find at least one melee infantry unit, a ranged infantry unit, a cavalry unit, a flying unit, a siege unit, and a support unit. Each faction also has at least 3 special units, and last but not least, a mate. In Hidden Tactics you also have the Mercenary faction. Each game features a random selection of mercenaries, which are available to be used for both players. Their purpose is to fill out some gaps in your deck, and they're organized in 4 tiers, with each tier being more powerful and expensive. Let me present you the units I had already added before this sequence, starting with the melee infantry, and of course with the humans and their trusty spearmen. Spearmen in Hidden Tactics do exactly what you would expect them to do. They are basic, they are melee, and they are infantry. No, just kidding. They are anti-large, so they deal double damage to large units, for example to those giants. Look at how well they do against those giants compared to the elven swordmen. Talking about the swordmen, which are I think my personal favorite unit. Those are hybrid melee and ranged units. They can fire one volley of arrows before heading to melee combat, and this capacity reloads every time they exit melee combat. A similar system is used for the dwarven basic melee unit. They have a shield which can tank a limited number of arrow volleys before breaking. This dwarven basic infantry completely counters the elf basic melee infantry. And finally, for the greenskins, well, they have basic axe goblins. And because we're into fantasy cliche, these goblin axemen rely mostly on their numbers in order to succeed in battle. Now let's look at the ranged units, starting with, again, the humans and their trusty bowmen, I guess. Just like the most basic ranged unit you could ever find. They have a 3 tiles ranged attack, and whenever an enemy enters their tile, they will switch to melee mode, using their small knife to deal a tiny bit of damage and die uselessly. True to their stereotypes, the elves have a powerful ranged unit, which has a 4 tiles range attack. However, don't expect them to do much better than humans in melee. The dwarves have a powerful crossbowman unit. There are only 4 crossbowmen in this troop, but their attack is quite deadly and also inflicts knockback. Finally, for the greenskins, well, again, they rely mostly on their numbers. These goblin bowmen have a smaller attack range and smaller damage, but there are lots of them. Now we're still in the units I added before this session, with 2 special units for the human faction, which are the samurais, armored units best at dealing with low damage dealing units such as these goblin axemen, and giants, perfect for dealing with troops with a lot of units, such as these goblin axemen. Yeah, I think you shouldn't play goblin axemen against the humans. And you shouldn't play goblin axemen against these elfin dire bears, which also have a huge AoE attack. They will be quite expensive, however. And for another very cool special units in the elven faction, the deer rider archers. Yes, they ride deers and they have bows, and they can even target units that are not on the same lane. And I think this will be very powerful, so they might be very expensive too. The dwarves have a second melee infantry, which units wield a great axe. This gives them an AoE attack with quite a lot of knockback. Let's stay in the dwarf units with the nutcracker. This one is a high damage dealing unit that is best to handle single units such as the dire bear we just talked about. It is countered by troops with a lot of units, such as the goblin axes. finally you get a use. Alright, to finish catching up with the units I had already developed, we have 2 siege units. First, the Goblin Rock Catapult. For this one, I'm hesitating between 2 range patterns, either a range of 4 with the first tile being not targetable, or a range of 5 with the 2 first tiles being not targetable. I guess we'll see during the playtest which one of these options is the best. Finally, the Dwarven Cannon has a range of 3 with no short range restriction, so it keeps firing until the last moment. As you've seen, both these siege units have an AoE attack, so they are best at countering these tightly packed units. Later on, when buildings will be implemented, they will also deal massive damage to buildings, of course. So that's basically the unit roster I had implemented before, and the objective of this working session was to expand this roster drastically. But actually, before I started adding new units, I had one major task to do. In fact, when I added the first units, I created all of their AI through script. And for the first basic melee and ranged units, that was okay, but at the dawn of adding tens of new units, some of them with very unique behaviors, I decided to refactor the whole system in order to make it compatible with my behavior tree asset. Behavior trees allow to handle easier, more complex AI by making a visual interface out of the decision making in your unit's brain, so that did require a few days of work. I won't be going in the details of this process, but if you're interested in a video of how specifically I switched from pure script AI to behavior tree AI, feel free to drop that in the comments. Now let me present you the expanded roster, starting with the flying units. So the humans have eagles, which are pretty numerous and have a fast attack rate. To implement these flying units, I had to work on my attack system in order to make the melee units not able to attack the flying units, while letting the ranged units target them. And usually the ranged units stop shooting whenever a unit enters their melee range. However, as you can see, this doesn't interact well with the flying units. So I had to add a condition: if it's a flying unit, well, you just keep shooting. The Elves flying unit is a wildfire, and the wildfire's attacks made me implement a status effect system. There will be at least 6 status effects in the game, and let me present you the first one: Fear. Scared units will basically run away to the opposite side of the battlefield for the duration of the effect. This is especially good to split enemy troops, and so wildfires inflict fear for a few seconds. I think I said that at 2 or 3. Next flying unit: the Dwarven Gyrocopter. This one's a super sturdy but slow flying unit that deals pretty high AoE damage, so you better pin that down with a lot of archers. And how about the Greenskins flying unit? Well, they have none. That's a design decision. Some factions have gaps in their roster. Greenskins have no air units, dwarves have no cavalry, and elves have no siege units. Humans, however, have no gaps because, again, following the stereotypical fantasy factions, humans are always kind of adapted to every situation. After the flying units, I started working on the support unit, and this made me work on many new systems. In Hidden Tactics, support units basically buff tiles in a pattern around them, effectively buffing all the units in those tiles. So here for the king, which is the human support unit, the king buffs attack speed by plus 50% for all the units around him. This is clearly way too powerful, so I think I will be reducing the number of tiles that are buffed. As I said, adding the support units made me work on a lot of systems. Handling the visuals when you're placing a support unit was quite a struggle. I want the player to be able to see which tiles are buffed, and whenever units are on one of these tiles, I want the buff visual effect to appear in transparency, and I want the exact same behavior whenever you're hovering a support unit. I also want this buff visual effect to appear whenever the battle is starting, and to disappear whenever the buffing unit dies. Oh, and I forgot to mention, the king is the first unit I implemented which has different types of units inside the troop. Here the king is guarded by spearmen, and whenever you decide to upgrade the troop, I haven't mentioned the troop upgrades yet, but that will come later, maybe in another video, you can also add archers to your king troop. So yet another system that came in with the support units. The Greenskin support unit is a flag bearer. He's guarded by 4 little axemen, and he has a huge attack damage buff. This one can be very deadly considering the number of units that compose each Greenskin troop. The dwarven support unit is the yellow beard dwarf. He's just a dwarf with a yellow beard. And this one buffs movement speed. Dwarven units are pretty slow, so this one will be very handy to close in the distance with those archer units. However, I wanted the dwarven yellow beard to be epic because he has a yellow beard, and so I had to add a new type of attack, the jump attack. This one really gave me headaches. I spent like 5 hours implementing this attack. I mean, at the beginning it just looked like he had a jetpack, so I added this explosion when he lands. I had some issues with the trail renderer, failed to specify the right jump distance, witnessed some more unexpected behavior, but after a lot of attempts, I finally had something I was quite happy about. This jump attack looks actually really powerful. We'll see how it works in the beta test. Now let's look at the last support units for the elves. This one was again a struggle to implement. Unlike the previous units, it doesn't have a buff effect that triggers at the beginning of a battle. However, it has a continuous support function. The tree spirits are healers. Healers, I said. Right now they're damaging the giants. So yeah, first thing I did was adding this healing visual effect, and then I had to think about how these tree spirits would behave. And I didn't want them to just follow a unit and buff this one single unit. So the first thing I did was to limit their movement to the tiles that are specified on the support troop. So for starters, I just made them roam within those tiles. And then how they work is pretty simple. Whenever units are damaged within those tiles, they will walk towards the closest damaged unit and start healing it. Oh, and they also have a super cool die effect. Whenever they die, they burst heal all the units in an AoE around them. To be honest, I'm not 100% sure that this behavior will be functional or not in battle. By functional, I mean useful. Again, we'll see during the beta test if that works. Alright, so we've already been through quite a lot of new units and systems. It was really cool to see that some of the systems I specifically implemented for the support units would automatically work for other units. For example, I haven't presented it yet, but the human cavalry has a charge attack. So if this unit doesn't meet any opponent unit for a certain amount of time, they will start charging, effectively buffing their movement speed, their attack damage, and their attack knockback. And the buff visuals automatically worked for the charge attack, so that was awesome. I also effectively reused the Yellowbeard jump attack for the Elven cavalry, the wargs. The wargs also have a jump attack, which has no AoE, but that deals more damage than a standard attack. To finish with the cavalry units, let's mention the greenskin cavalry, which are the boar riders. Boar riders are unstoppable. They will never stop walking forward, so you better bunker up to handle them. They aren't the fastest cavalry unit, however, but they can attack while moving, which is really cool. Alright, so before showing you the mercenary units, let me mention the two last units I added in the greenskin roster, starting with the giant spiders and their extremely powerful web attack, which allows to slow down units, effectively splitting up enemy troops. Implementing this web attack led to a fun situation where when both spiders hit the same unit, this one starts moving backwards. You guessed it, since I'm debuffing the move speed whenever a web hits its target. If I don't add any condition, this can lead to negative move speeds. Last, but especially for this one, not least, unit in the greenskin roster, the Goblin Catapult. This one doesn't throw rocks, it throws goblins. Do I have to say anything more to convince you this is the best unit in the game? Just look at this. I mean, I didn't come up with this unit. I'm using assets for this game. If you haven't realized yet, those are MiniFantasy assets, so the very low scale resolution 8x8 pixel art assets created by Krishna, an awesome indie pixel artist, and he's the one with the wicked mind that came up with this Goblin Catapult. By the way, if you're interested in those assets, know that we're running a special discount on the whole MiniFantasy collection. You'll find a link in the description for that. It's an affiliate link, so if you buy the collection through this link, I get a commission, and you're indirectly supporting me too. In this pack, you'll find everything you need to create any 2D game you want, from characters to creatures and biomes, weapon animations and spell animations, buildings with outside and inside views, and other random packs like this trains pack, which is one of my favorite actually. To be more specific, here for Hidden Tactics, I'm using rescaled versions of the assets. If you're interested, I can share with you the link to the tool I'm using to rescale those assets. Shout out to Coke and Code for making this tool public. Again, thanks to all of you who bought this collection through the link in the past. Anyways, the Goblin Catapult, very strong unit. However, best used in combination with melee units, of course. Sending those goblins flying without any melee troop engaged will just lead them to certain death. We've now covered all the units I've implemented for the 4 player factions. Now let's take a look at the Mercenary faction. So Mercenaries are organized in 4 tiers, as I said previously, starting at tier 1 with the Wind Elemental. This one is designed as a control unit. Doesn't deal much damage, but it has a very fast and high knockback attack. This attack targets a random unit in the enemy troop, so it is perfect to split those troops, making them easier to pick up one by one, and even maybe sending them them to nearby lanes. Now let's take a look at a tier 2 I added right after this one, the Diablo. So this one introduces another status effect, burning. So whenever burning is triggered, it will deal a high amount of damage on a limited time. The Diablo has a really cool die animation, so I had to make an effect with that animation. In fact, when a Diablo dies, it will trigger burning on all the troops around him in an area of effect. After the Diablo, I implemented the Imp, which is a level 1 flying mercenary, which also has a ranged burning attack. So I decided to make this ranged attack limited. It has 1 ammo and then it reloads whenever it exits melee combat. I'm just reusing the Elven Sword system here, and then it will head to melee combat just as a standard flying unit. However, in order to make it stand out from the Diablo troop, I slightly reworked the Diablo. So the Diablo still has this ranged burning attack, but I highly increased its range and I made the projectile look more like an artillery shot. I think this looks great and make these two units very different. Heading to a level 2 mercenary in the Rat family. Yeah, by the way, the mercenaries kind of have families. There's the Rat family, there's the Demon family, there's also the Elemental family. They don't have a real impact in the game, they're just linked by their mechanic and stuff. So the level 2 Rat people are a ranged troop with a very high attack rate, but very low direct damage. Instead, their attack has an AoE which deals poisoned. The poisoned status effect works slightly differently than the burning status effect. It deals less damage over time. However, unlike burning, it stacks up. So each poison status effect stacks up with the previous one until a maximum amount. My first idea to show this poisoned stacking effect didn't look really good in my opinion, so I was filling the HP bar with green. The idea was interesting, but it just didn't look good. So I replaced it with an icon near the HP bar. The icon is active whenever poison is triggered, and it fills up as the poison status effect stacks up. This system also allowed me to highlight in a more clear way the other status effects. Burning and Scared are also shown using the system, and I think this looks better and is more clear, especially when multiple status effects are applied to the same unit. Now let's take a look at the level 3 mercenaries, which I didn't develop much yet. I just implemented 2 very basic level 3 mercenaries, the Minotaur, which has a high AoE attack, and the Demon Spider. This one has a high damage attack, perfect to deal with the Minotaur, for example. However, the Demon Spider will be completely countered by this level 1 mercenary I didn't introduce yet, the Rat. In the Rat family again. The rats are very numerous, they have low HP, a low damage, high rate attack, and they deal poisoned. Brace yourselves, rats are coming. Finally, let's look at the 2 level 4 mercenaries I implemented. We have the Demon Lord. This one is a very big, high HP, high damage dealing, AoE, fire burning attack. That's a lot of adjectives. And for the other level 4 mercenary, my new favorite mercenary unit, the Rat Royalty. So we have a Rat King in this troop, with as vanguard rats, and to support him, rat people. Best thing about the Rat King, he can throw rat people, disrespecting his subjects at its finest. I hope you enjoyed this video. I really had a ton of fun creating those units. I'm almost ready to start working on finalizing a beta test version of the game. I do have quite a few buildings to add in the game now, but once this is ready, I'll work on a beta test version. So if you're interested in being a beta tester, well, feel free to join my Discord server. I'll put the link in the description below. Let me know in the comments below if you'd like to see a video on how I add those buildings, and if you'd like to see more Hidden Tactics development videos. I don't know if you have any other ideas. Especially if you want an episode 2 of adding units to the game, since this is something new for me, and if you'd like to see a video on the remaining units. See you soon on YouTube for the first edition of the Unpaused Jam, and in the meanwhile, press play. Actually, press wishlist.